There's a problem with HTMX, and it's the problem that everyone has, because when you're working with HTMX, you have to interact with a server that returns pre-rendered HTML. That's a problem, because when you're working with APIs and making API calls and requests to remote servers, you want to typically keep all the data that's being exchanged in data space rather than document space. And HTML is a markup of document space data. You can totally do it, and that's where HTMX wants you to do this, though it is kind of an anti-pattern. And most APIs, they all have data serialization. To keep data in data space, usually JSON is the data that comes back from APIs. So if you want to work with HTMX, their main way to do it is if you update the API or add a wrapper around it to return HTML instead of JSON, which adds extra work or extra server work. And so the problem, you can have data view patterns where you put, parameters at the end of the API call URL that say what format to return the data in. You could say JSON or seabor or some like other kind of, or like XML. You could even have it in HTML. Perfectly fine. That's just a lot of extra work that you have to build into your server. Wouldn't it be great if you didn't have to do any of that? You can interact with any API that you wanted to and still use HTMX. Good news, you can do it! And HTMX makes it super easy by including the client-side template extension. And really even better, they give you a whole bunch of templates that are supported, template language. You've got Mustache, which is probably one of the more common next to handlebars, nunchucks, and XL. Don't worry about that one. XLT. What is this? You don't want that one. This one makes your life worse. I promise. You'll typically want to use Mustache or handlebars. So check out the client-side template extension in HTMX if you want to interact directly with JSON APIs. HTMX has an included extension that lets you use JSON as your input data and absorb that into your HTMX application. What's fantastic about that is that most server APIs are written in JSON, or they return JSON data. Whereas HTMX, they kind of want you to use HTML being returned from the server directly, which means that you have to do a lot of extra server work. Guess what? You don't have to if you use the client-side templates extension. It supports transforming JSON and XML requests into HTML with a client-side template. It's really cool. I love this. Is my favorite. Okay. I would only choose to go down this path. I would choose specifically to use this pattern rather than having a server returning HTML, even if it was just a different view on the data that's being returned. So it's really simple, easy installation. All you do is copy and paste this script and add it into your next to all your other scripts. And then you also want to include the template engine as well. And now you can use a template to interpret where the data is going to be positioned from your JSON response. Check this out. Here's a full example. So we have our core HTMX, then we have our extension client-side templates here. Next, we're going to have our template engine, right? We want to make sure to include our template engine as well. Now we have everything we need. All we have to do is hit an API endpoint. We also need to specify that this will include client-side rendering. And then you want to make sure that your template, say we're using Mustache template here, is identified with the ID, the template ID. So you've got template here, template foo. And what's really cool is you can reuse these templates. So you define a template and that can be reused anywhere else. Now the syntax is a little bit annoying here. I don't necessarily like the syntax of this end raw business. I'm not really into that. You don't have to do it that way. You can do it a little bit differently. But that's it. This is a full end-to-end example interacting using HTMX with a JSON API. I actually do want to check really quick. Let's look at what this data returns. What is this data right here? Okay, so a to-do list returns data like this. So we've got the user ID, the ID of the to-do item, the title of the to-do item, and whether that to-do item has been completed. And see, now this is all JSON data. So it's, a serialized representation of structure, which then can be imported into any language anywhere. So that's why it's pretty universal, right? We want to use our APIs as JSON. Now you can import that and use that directly in your HTMX application. So we've got our title here, right? Our title is in this element, so the word title. And then if we jump back here, we'll see the word title being used right here. So we can see that within its templates. So the title will be rendered right there. As soon as we click the button, it will render right in. Let's try it out. We'll be using HTMX in tandem with a JSON API. And You know, HTMX, it wants data back in HTML format from the API, though guess what? Most APIs, they return JSON. So wouldn't it be nice if we could use just the JSON API with HTMX? And yes, we can do it. Here's the code. It's really simple. Actually, look, it's very tiny. There's very little code going on here. So we have our standard HTML page, and then we have 3 scripts that we're including. Here's the core HTMX framework itself. And then we have an extension, which is a client-side rendering extension. Pretty simple. And then we import our template engine that we're going to be using for that. And we like Mustache. Mustache is a pretty good one, pretty common, pretty standard that we'll see in most places. Mustache is a really good example. And actually the one I recommend, you probably, if you don't know which template engine to use Mustache. They make it really easy. So here we have a simple div where we've notified HTMX that we're going to be using extensions here, which is the client-side templates. Then we're going to make an API call to fetch to-do list items, and we're just going to grab the first to-do list item. Then we set the target, which is going to be a content div, or well, paragraph in this case, with ID set to content. So as soon as we click this button here, right, the click me button, it's going to populate data, and it's going to swap out the inner HTML. So the start will disappear and it will turn into this template rendered. Note that we have mustache template equals foo, which represents the template ID of foo. And any data that we get back from this endpoint will then be interpretable here using these mustache sort of handlebars, right? The curly brackets, the curly braces here. So we've got user ID, ID, title, and completed. So title, completed. And in the JSON API itself, it actually returns that data that we're looking for. You can see this is where that data is coming from on this API endpoint. So as soon as we click the click me button, we should see a data being fetched from this API, and the data will be populated it'll render this template and populate it here. Let's try it out. Let's see. All right, we've got our start here, which is the paragraph. Then we got a click me button, which is a click me right here. If I click it, it should make it. Oh, yep, there it goes. So it made a fetch to the endpoint. It found that the user ID is 1. So our user ID here is 1, and our ID of the to-do list item is 1. So 1 and 1, which is how we kind of had it set up here. Actually, I would just say to-do ID. There we go. So we see that a little bit better. And then click me. So we see user ID 1. To-do ID is 1, and then there's the title, and we have is completed. So we should be able to see when I click me that template, yep, so we got user ID, to-do item 1, title, Latin words, and is completed false. So there we go, we did it, we built it. What happens if we make this a div? I'm just kind of curious. Div. Click, does it work? It still works. Okay, so something that we could do is, make it look a little bit nicer. So just make all of these into divs really quick. Here we go. And then we click start. Okay, so now it's a little more organized, right? So we've gone a step further in making it look good by separating all these lines. There we go, it's a little more organized. So user ID, to-do ID, title, and completed. And that's where we get the data. And that's it. Isn't that straightforward? So in order to interact with JSON APIs using HTMX framework, you'll just use this template engine called Mustache, and then you use the setup that we have here. Make sure to include your extension, right? Because we're using the client-side template extension, and then just modify your HTML just a little bit, so that way it can interpret this new syntax. And I like this a lot more. It gives you a lot more flexibility on the front end as well, because now you can capture the data from a JSON API and then put it wherever you want a lot more easily, rather than just sort of getting like a bundle of HTML from the server. This should be probably the default for HTMX. They should include this as the default, and it should be the way going forward. It does add a little bit more, just a teeny bit more extra effort on the front end. It gives you a lot more flexibility because now you can fully interact with any parts of the data and then put that data wherever you want on the UI. If you're working with WordPress, you probably already know that WordPress has a robust API where you can interact with all the components and content that is stored in the WordPress database. Simple API is very RESTful, easy to understand, all referenceable by ID. You can paginate, you can fetch data, you can even update data. Their API is really powerful. They use an industry standard that is RESTful, and also data is represented in JSON serialized format. So you've got the JSON serialized format that makes it pretty universal, so you can use it with any language, because you can deserialize and serialize data pretty much in every language these days. Though, of course, if you're using one of the new up-and-coming JavaScript frameworks that eliminates the need for JavaScript, HTMX, the HTMX framework makes it super easy for you to build front-end web apps without the need to write any JavaScript at all. Though it does want you to import all of your API calls using HTML. Good news, you can use an API extension. There's an API extension that allows you to transform JSON or any other kind of data, XML for example, into HTML directly. So now you can consume any API, including the WordPress API, into your HTMX, which is fantastic. I love this. All right, let's actually give it a try. In the WordPress developer docs, we see that we've got the ability to do a lot of different things, including updating and reading from the database to grab the posts, the comments, the configuration, a whole bunch of things. Basically, all the kinds of data that you want. Oh wow, look, so we've got user sites, post, comments. Oh, stats and data, menuing, media, video. Wait, media and videos, they kind of seem like the same thing. WordPress is a content publishing platform, sort of, and we want to be able to, this is probably one of the more common use cases, to fetch the content written. So we could get a list of pages to be displayed as options in a select a page dropdown. You can get a single post, you can edit the post, we can get all the posts. So that's kind of what we want to do. I want to be able to get a list of all the posts. Let's see here really quick. Oh, wow. 1,700 posts found. All right, that's quite a bit. And as you can see, it's all in JSON. All this data is in JSON format. So a lot of posts, and it's got a lot of metadata. It looks like I see images in there. And it is paginated. So we see here there's a next page, which gives us the next query to page for. So what we can do is we can grab the first post and then display it on the screen. Let's see if we can make that happen. All right, in order to get around some cross-site origin requests security settings, I had to move the data locally, so that way it's a little more easily straightforward to work with. So I downloaded the data from the WordPress API just for testing purposes. I put it into the same directory and called it wordpressdata.json, and here's the file right here. It's got a whole bunch of entries. I added 10 entries in total. And so with Mustache, it makes it really easy to sort of iterate through list of items. So we've got posts here, right? So we've got posts, which is going to be an array. And in Mustache, all you have to do is type posts, which is going to be the array that you're going to be iterating through. And so you've got another posts here. So it's a pretty simple list. And then any data that's inside of that list is going to be an object. So we've got the ID of the post. We're also going to have the author, and the author has like their name, so we can grab their name, .name. All right, there's also a title. We can grab the title here, and I'll just put like a little break there. And now we have everything in place. I think this should work. I'm pretty sure this should work. So all we have to do is open our HTML page, which is our page that we're looking at right now in a web browser. Open our index HTML. Here we go. I also I did it through a simple server as well, so we need to make sure that we're running a server. You can do that really easily just by saying python 3-m hp server. Now if we click me, we should see a list of the WordPress posts on the page using HTMX, and it grabbed just the data that we're looking for, and it works. Oh, the title's missing. Oh no. But we do have the author and we have the ID of the post. Now we just need to figure out why the title's missing. Probably because we just didn't grab it all the way through. So let's fix that really quick. So we've got the title, the date modified. Okay, it was something silly. It was all right. It was all good. But our Copilot added this rendered, which just doesn't exist. That doesn't exist. So we just get rid of that. Now we should see the title when we click me, and we did. All right, so we got a title just launched, written by Lewis. And we got another title called Recreating the New York Times by Jeremy. World Camp Asia 2024 by Paulo. It works! We did it! Look at that! Using HTMX with the JSON API and WordPress, combine those together, and they makes it really simple. And here we go. This is it. This is all you need. Just make sure to include your dependencies, right? So you've got the HTMX core library, you've got the client-side template extension, and then you've got the template engine that you're using, which is Mustache. Then you want to make sure that you're representing you're saying, hey, there is a extension being used here. Gotta let HTMX know. Then you set your button to fetch the data, and I just have it locally for course purposes. I have it locally stored. The swap will be inner HTML. The target is going to be the ID of content, which is this one right here. You can see the difference. And then we're going to be using the Mustache template foo, which is identified by foo. And then we're going to iterate over all the posts in the return of the JSON, and we're going to print out just the title and the author and the ID of the post. And that's it. And you can go even further. You can add more data that's available. So we've got the date information. We know when it was modified, the original URL, so you can go straight to the post and get all the content. And you've got a short URL as well. So what we could do is we could wrap the title with an anchor tag and then add in the short URL here, reload the page, click, and now we gotta make sure it's href. It's been a little while since I wrote some HTML. All right, now we can click me, and now it will link directly to the post. That's so cool. So now you can use WordPress APIs with HTMX framework directly by using the JSON API and the RESTful WordPress API directly, in combination with the client-side templates extension with HTMX.